Saint Teresa of Avila, 1515 to 1582, used to be a Spanish mystic, author and reformer of the Carmelite order. She used to be an influential and pivotal parent of her generation. Saint Teresa, Teresa de Cepeda y Ahumada, used to be born in Avila, Spain on the 28th of March 1515. Her dad and mom have been each pious Catholics and in some approaches stimulated their daughter to take up a existence of prayer. As a younger child, Teresa confirmed symptoms of a deeply spiritual nature. She would regularly throw back into silence for prayer and would experience giving alms to the poor. She used to be very shut to her mother, who supplied a heat counterbalance to the strictness of her father. However, in her teens, Teresa's mom handed away, leaving the younger Teresa distraught at the void she felt. The younger Saint Teresa tells of her despair and how she became instinctively to the Virgin Mary for comfort. I threw myself down in despair earlier than in picture of the Mother of God. With many tears, I implored the Holy Virgin to grow to be my mom now. Uttered with the simplicity of a child, this prayer used to be heard. From that hour on, I in no way prayed to the Virgin in vain. 1. During her later teen years, Avila misplaced some of her early piety and spiritual zeal. She recounted how she grew to become involved in worldly things and loved the enterprise of an extensive circle of friends. She had a herbal appeal and observed it handy to make friends. In return, she loved the compliments and friendships of others. However, she used to be now not at peace, thinking about herself to be a depressing sinner. Later she would seem return in guilt at her early life. However, this feel of being a miserable sinner was once in all likelihood the end result of a harsh self-judgment, inspired with the aid of her father's exacting non-secular standards. At the age of 16, her father determined to ship Teresa to a convent college to be educated. This reignited in Teresa an hobby in following a non-secular lifestyles, and after some deliberation resolved to grow to be a nun of the Carmelite order. At the time, the convent regulations have been now not very strict. It used to be probable greater cozy than residing with her father. The convent prevalent many humans into the order, regularly for economic reasons. The convent grew to be overcrowded, and human beings have been regularly judged now not by using religious depth however on fabric possessions. In this climate, Teresa struggled to discover time for quiet reflection, even though she did begin instructing human beings on the virtues of intellectual prayer. Shortly after turning into a nun, Teresa skilled an extreme sickness, malaria, which left her in extraordinary ache for a lengthy period. At one factor it was once feared that her sickness was once so extreme that she would now not be capable to recover. However, at some stage in this length of extreme bodily pain, she started to more and more journey divine visions and an internal experience of peace. These internal experiences of pleasure and peace appeared to transcend the severe bodily ache of the body. She describes in her very own phrases her kingdom of thinking. All through these trials and tribulations, I bore these sufferings with super composure, in truth with joy, barring at first when the ache was once too severe. What observed appeared to damage less. I used to be definitely surrendered to the will of God even if He meant to burden me like this forever. The different sisters questioned at my God-given patience. Without Him I certainly should now not have borne so tons with so a great deal joy. 2. When she was once a little better, she resumed her prayers with renewed vigor. However, after telling others of her visions and non-secular experiences, she used to be dissuaded from pursuing them. Certain clergy felt they have been delusions of the devil. As a result, for many years Teresa misplaced the self-assurance to practice her prayers, and her religious lifestyles used to be nearly put on hold. However, when Teresa used to be 41, she met a priest who satisfied her to go, return to her prayers and implore God to come back. Initially, she had some subjects sitting via prayers. She wryly remarked the give up of the hour's prayer couldn't come quickly enough. However, in the direction of time, she grew to be absorbed in deep contemplation in which she felt an ever-growing feel of oneness with God. At instances she felt overwhelmed with divine love. The experiences have been so transforming. She at instances felt the illumining grace of God would wash her soul away. She used to be so stuffed with divine contemplation it is stated at instances her physique would spontaneously levitate. Teresa, however, was once now not eager on these public shows of miracles. When she felt it going on, she would ask different nuns to sit down on her to forestall her floating away. Teresa used to be no longer simply a quiet, placid saint. She had an endearing, herbal quality. Her lifestyle's power attracted and stimulated many who had been close. They admired her for each her outer attraction and internal serenity. But at the equal time, her spiritual ecstasies additionally brought about jealousy and suspicion. Unfortunately, she used to be born into the length of the Spanish Inquisition. All through this time any deviation from the orthodox spiritual trip got here beneath strict remark and scrutiny. On one event Teresa complained to God about her mistreatment from so many distinct people. God responded to her pronouncing, "That is how I continually deal with my friends." With true humor, Saint Teresa replied, "That have to be why you have so few friends." Saint Teresa struggled due to the fact there have been few who may want to apprehend or recognize her internal ecstasies. However, on the one hand, she felt these experiences to be extra actual than regular events. At the age of 43, Saint Teresa determined she desired to determine a new order recommitting to the values of poverty and simplicity. She desired to pass away from her existing convent, which made a lifestyles of prayer greater difficult. Initially, her targets have been greeted with tremendous opposition from inside the city of Avila. However, with the help of some priests, the opposition waned, and she used to be allowed to set up her first convent. Saint Teresa proved to be an influential chief and founder. She guided the nuns now, not simply through strict disciplines, however additionally via the electricity of love and common sense. Her way used to be now not the way of inflexible asceticism and self-denial. Although she underwent many tribulations herself, to others, she pressured the significance of experiencing God's love. As she herself says, "You know, I no longer govern in the way I used to. Love does everything. I am no longer positive if that is due to the fact no one offers me purpose to reprove her, or due to the fact I have observed that matters go higher in that way." p.657.3. The vital issue is no longer to assume a great deal, however to love plenty, and so do that which high quality stirs you to love. Love is now not remarkable pleasure, however wish to please God in everything. 1. Saint Teresa committed lots of the relaxation of her existence to touring round Spain, putting up new convents based totally on the historic monastic traditions. Her travels and work have been now not continually greeted with enthusiasm. Many resented her reforms and the implied criticism of present spiritual orders. She regularly met with criticism which include the papal nuncio, who used the instead descriptive phrase, "a stressed disobedient gadabout who has long gone about instructing as even though she have been a professor." Saint Teresa additionally had to often contend with tough dwelling stipulations and her frail health. However, she by no means let these limitations dissuade her from her life's task. She ultimately died on October 4 at The age of 67, a fellow sister describes the hours simply earlier than the demise of Saint Teresa. She remained in this role in prayer, full of deep peace and splendid repose. Occasionally she gave some outward signal of shock or amazement, but the whole thing proceeded in brilliant repose. It appeared as if she had been listening to a voice which she answered. Her facial expression used to be so wondrously modified that it seemed like a celestial physique to us. Thus immersed in prayer, blissful and smiling, she went out of this world into everlasting life. 2. Saint Teresa of Avila was once one of the magnificent Christian mystics. Overcoming bodily ailments, she grew to be wholly absorbed in her devotion to God. As current religious grasp Sri Chinmoy says, in Spain, Teresa of Avila provided to the world something profoundly mystical. Her mystical trip is the most profitable fruits of the divine marriage between the aspiring soul and the releasing Christ, and it is right here that man's helpless crying will and God's all-powerful, all-fulfilling will embody every other. 5. Works of Teresa of Avila. In 1566 she wrote Camino de Perfección, Way of Perfection, to inform the nuns how to attain their goal. In 1580 she wrote what is viewed her best work, the Castillo Interior, Las Moradas, Interior Castle. The Mansions. This concerned describing the quite a number tiers of religious evolution made to full prayer. She wrote Las Fundaciones, Foundations, from 1573 to 1582, so they would have in mind the early records of their order. Poetry of Saint Teresa Avila. Street Teresa wrote a number of volumes of poetry. Her most famous, 4p.33, God by Myself is Enough. Let nothing upset you, let nothing startle you. All matters pass, God does now not change. Patience wins all it seeks. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God on my own is